Hello, I'm Eric Teitelman with the Jerusalem Connection Truth Report for this week. Today is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Outside of the Sabbath, it is the most holy day of the year to the Jewish people. It's a day of fasting, it's a day of afflicting our souls, and the Jewish rabbis teach that on this day that God is judging the hearts of men and He is writing in the books of life who will live and who will die. We've been studying about the fall feasts, and we see that these feasts point to the second coming of Christ. We also learned that at the end of the age there's a 7-year period and then a 3.5-year time called the time of Jacob's troubles, in which God is judging the nation of Israel, but He's also judging the nations. Just as we learned that the spring feasts were fulfilled exactly to the day and the hour, the fall feast also will be fulfilled exactly to the day and the hour. We learned that Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, is the revealing and coronation of our King. We learned that the 10 days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is when God is pouring out His judgment on the nations. We also see during this time now that there's a great battle that is taking place. It's called the Battle of Armageddon. The word comes from a Hebrew word, Har Megiddo, Mount Megiddo, which is right next to the plain of the Jezreel Valley, hence the anglicized version of Armageddon. But this is when all the nations, God brings in judgment against Israel. He brings all the nations against Israel and against Jerusalem. And we see from biblical history that God has historically used other nations to judge Israel, and then afterwards He has actually turned and destroyed the nation that He has used for His instrument of judgment. This is the day when Christ, Yeshua, physically comes back to the earth. It's the day when His feet, it says in Zechariah chapter 14, actually stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem. It's the day when He destroys those armies, and in doing so He makes atonement for His land and for His people. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 32, "Rejoice, O Gentiles and His people, for He will avenge the blood of His servants and render vengeance to His adversaries. He will provide atonement for His land and His people." And Paul in Romans 11 says, "And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, the deliverer who is Yeshua will come out of Zion, and He will turn away ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant with them when I take away their sins." This is why it's called the Day of Atonement. Now the Gentiles have been called to provoke Israel to jealousy, but they've also been called to intercede for the nation of Israel. And we see a picture of this in Joel chapter 2, verse 16. It says, "Gather the people, sanctify the congregation. Let the priests who minister to the Lord weep between the porch and the altar. Let them say, 'Spare your people, who is Israel. Spare them, O Lord, and do not give your heritage to reproach, that the nation should rule over them.'" You see, it is the Gentiles, it is the church that actually intercedes for Israel when God is pouring out His righteous judgments on the nation. When all of the armies of the world have come against Jerusalem, it is the church that cries out in intercession for God to spare His heritage. They're really even saying, for your own name's sake, spare your people. Why should they say that there is no God in Israel? Then Yeshua comes in the clouds with power and great glory. He destroys the armies that have come against Jerusalem. It says in Zechariah 14, it says, "Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as He fights in the day of battle." The Lord then takes back Israel as His inheritance, His heritage. He forgives and removes all her sins. He joins her with the church and the remnant of all the nations. It says in Isaiah 60, "Then for the nation and the kingdom which will not serve you will perish, and those nations shall utterly be ruined." God will establish His kingdom in Israel from Jerusalem. And that's the truth.